Welcome, everyone. Welcome to M365 Change in the Real World, how a Fortune 500 insurance firm manages 2,500 message center updates a year. I'm Michael Blumenthal, your host today. My guest is David Ramos, an O365 Senior Productivity Analyst. I want to thank our partners, M365 Chicago. Find more about M365 Chicago at m365chicago.com, and a partner, Change Pilot from Empowering Cloud. Let's introduce the speakers here today, myself and David Ramos. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, so much for the introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is David Ramos. I'm a former O365 Senior Productivity Analyst at a large insurance firm company. We pretty much review constantly change management on a weekly basis. So we're here to talk about how to manage those message center updates.
Thank you, David. I'm Michael Blumenthal. I am a Microsoft MVP. I've been recognized as an MVP since 2015, and I'm passionate about message center triage. This is a discipline I brought to tenants that have been managing since for the last 9 years. Currently, for the last 4 years, I'm the Microsoft product manager at NORC. NORC is a research institute affiliated with the University of Chicago. Here, I run a small team, which is responsible for service change management, message center operations, Azure, Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, everything Microsoft. And so service change management is a key part of what we do, and it's a lot to keep up with. If any of you have worked with Message Center on a regular basis, you'll have noticed that the number of messages, the number of change announcements keeps increasing. We gathered some statistics, and last year in my tenant, we saw over 2,000 messages. Some tenants saw in the last 12 months as much as 2,500 messages. That is a significant increase from past years. Two years ago, we saw 1,500 messages. The year before that was 1,400. That jump from 1,500 messages to 2,000 messages represents a huge leap in the amount of announcements that we need to assess and figure out the impact on the organization. And we're getting so many messages because M365 is an always-on, evergreen suite of applications. And so there's change every day. Microsoft is delivering changes to our tenants every single day. And what that means for us varies a lot. From one change announcement to another, the impact of these things can be very different. For example, a recent change announcement was about Together mode in Microsoft Teams going away. If you've never used Together mode, or you're an organization that doesn't use Teams, uses all the other stuff, perhaps, this can be not impactful at all. If you do use Together mode, then that can be a big change. There are many other examples of how different changes can be. Some are we're adding a new LLM choice in Copilot. Another change could be something like we're deprecating some workflows or a workflow engine. These can have wildly different impacts on your organization, and you have limited time and attention to handle these. At least most of us do. And the organization I come from is about 2,200 people. We have a team of about 6 of us managing M365. David has been in the some enviable position of being in a much larger organization, and that's what I'm going to talk to him about now. So, David, tell us about the IT organization that you came from. How many people were involved in managing M365 change? How many people were there in the IT department overall? And what roles were involved? Were there roles inside of IT, outside of IT? Any roles that you needed to have in your change management process that you didn't expect?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So at our company, we were pretty much managing around 50,000 machines, including servers. So it was a large company, and with such a large company, we need a lot of people managing the M365 change management. So in our team, we pretty much will be having one person from each technology that we pretty much pay for. So Office, Exchange, Azure Entra, dynamics, and everything. So pretty much our team consisted maybe around 20 to 30 people, pretty much directors and people that were managing it. So it was a big team helping us manage it, but it didn't make it any easier, to be honest. How many, Michael, you asked how many people were in IT. So pretty much in IT, it specifically, there was around maybe 100 people overall. And funny that you mentioned what roles I didn't expect in this position, in this change management. One of the positions I did not expect to engage was corporate comms. That's one thing. Corporate comms, when it comes to application that they got deprecated, or they're changing their system, something's changing that will affect the user. We needed to communicate that with everybody, and corporate comms was our best friend at those moments when it comes to how to word it in a way that makes sense to people, how to word it in a way to get our point across without being too technical. So I would say corporate communications was one big help in those changes.
The Great, thank you for that. So my next set of questions then are about who owns Message Center and the triage process. You have said you've got a group of 20 people that are core to that, like a person for every technology, and evaluating who leads that group and how did you come up with the processes of what you do in a triage session? One more question, which is, and then as the number of messages got larger, did you see friction in that process? What did things start breaking down? Did you have to change things as the volume increased?
Yeah, so pretty much the message center was owned by my manager. She would be the one who would pretty much be the main contact. She would be triage. She would be the lead when it comes to that. So her and another person, pretty much they would be the managers or the people leading these triages. But the decisions that were made during this were how to whom this message goes to, pretty much to who do we need to assign this to, what impact is going to come across our company. And for some of the decisions that we were having, it was difficult because we didn't know who to engage. Sometimes we didn't know what it wasn't. Sometimes it wasn't clear what the message was saying sometimes. So we had to pretty much engage Microsoft themselves to give us more details on what's going on, or give us a little bit more details. You mentioned about getting stuck, or the process getting stuck. It was some once in a while we will be getting stuck. We will see some friction because it will see a decrease of people coming in into the meetings, and we would just have to engage them outside the meeting. So we could. One of the things we see a lot is just the fatigue of this message center. So many people were just, it was on a weekly basis, so it was a little fatiguing for people just to be here, sit through slog, and just hear other people talk about, pretty much read out the message center, which more for the most part it wasn't. It didn't. It wasn't even about their technology. Most of the time, to be honest, but they had to be there for just in case something had popped up for them. So it's just fatigue is one of the most difficult things we had to overcome and work through.
Okay. I see a question in the chat about change communications. And like when you decided that a change that the team was reviewing needed, it was going to impact the users, like, and you worked with corporate comms, what did that look like? Did that look like an email to all users? Did it look like a SharePoint post? How did you get the message out to users when you had a change that was going to impact them?
It was a twofold solution. Pretty much, the first one will be put in on a post on the All Technology or All Colleagues Yammer page in our pretty much Yammer admin center. The second one would be a post or an email to pretty much everybody. We used to send an emails about what's going on in the company, and that part of the communication would be put in that what's going on with the company.
That's interesting, and I think there. So you used what's now called Viva Engage, but was Yammer back then, and I know you had a well-managed Yammer environment and resources committed to making that successful. So that was a very effective way to communicate with people. I've seen other organizations like the one I'm in currently where we don't use Yammer. and we don't use Engage, but instead we do corporate communications, which can be email, SharePoint posts. It's been in particular, and then like there are a couple of corporate newsletters and an IT-specific newsletter where we might link back to the post in SharePoint. We also have some digital signage for people who are in the office as another way to get the word out. And then as there are times when we'll present to about quarterly, we'll have a meeting between a cross-departmental meeting, and that'll be another opportunity to mention to communicate some of these changes. Let's see. I think to your last point that there was like the volume and getting everybody into one meeting could make that a very expensive meeting. Were you able to do anything to mitigate that, or was that just sort of the cost of doing business?
No, we did some mitigation. We pretty much, thanks to our large size and budget, we were able to bring in a Microsoft engineer or Microsoft person with us into those meetings. And instead of engaging them outside the message center, we would engage them right away and ask them, okay, can you give us some explanation on this? So it made it a little bit more engaging, made it a little bit more easier to follow through, and that kind of picked up a little more. That diminished the fatigue. The fatigue is still going to be there, to be honest, but it did diminish it a little bit when we were able to engage Microsoft directly in those meetings.
Thank you. I think that's definitely one of the advantages of being in a larger organization. And I should say that several years ago, David, I worked in the same organization as David. Having that dedicated account team serving that customer, because they're such a large customer, having a dedicated resource who would come to those meetings and get questions answered about when message center posts were vague is extremely valuable, but it's a privilege limited to only those organizations that have the relationship and the resources with Microsoft to have someone be able to do that. Small organizations in Message Center, you can definitely give a thumbs down to the messages in Message Center. One of the things that we did for a long time was we would sync Message Center messages to Planner. I've talked about that elsewhere. I'm not going to deep dive into that here. And then you can treat them as tasks and assign them out to people. Again, if you are of a size where you have a dedicated account team or an account rep at Microsoft, engaging with them can help. There's both the account executive, but also if you've got a support contract with Microsoft, you can engage with your Microsoft partners there to help get clarity on some of these more nebulous Message Center posts. Okay, let's move on to the next set of questions. So what's worked well, what hasn't, and what would you do differently? What's something that you feel like is working really well with your process? What's something you tried, but it didn't work out the way you expected? And if you're going to go manage a new tenant today, what would you do differently?
I did mention in your last question, like bringing in one thing that worked well for us was bringing in Microsoft Rep, having them asking questions or interacting with us, just going to the message center, anything that was unclear or any details, just engage them right away. One of the things that sounded good but didn't really survive was having more people in those meetings, having more people from our corporation in those meetings, because with the more people there, the more news will cascade down in theory. But it didn't work that well. People just showed up for a couple of meetings and they start showing up, and actually we start getting less and less people into those meetings until we had to establish a quorum of who has to be there and engage with us, pretty much. And one thing I would start over today, the way the Message Center was set up when I started there, it was really good. As you mentioned, Michael, you were there, you saw how it was. So pretty much it would be putting the Message Center post into a planner, and then pretty much we would assign them. So that worked really well. Besides that, I would say maybe better automation, better assignment, or make it a little bit more clear on what's going on or what gets assigned to whom.
Okay. Thank you. I see we've got a number of questions going on in the chat. I think some of them we'll get to at the end, but one of them I'll call out now is Given the number of message center updates, how are you able to approach identifying critical items you need to focus your resources on?
That's a good question. Pretty much everything, any deprecation that's coming out soon, any change in services, anything that pretty much will anything that the user will notice right away, or it will to bring a service down, that will be our most top priority, and that will have the most attention for from our team to pretty much tackle or get some clarifications on.
Thank you. And if I'll share my answers to that. For a long time, we did message center sync to planner, and then we would do a review weekly with our team here. Again, my team's much smaller, 6 people, and then sometimes we would have one person pre-review and just go through all the messages, which could be 40 messages a week, and look at and just do a quick review of okay, which ones are things that are going to be user impactful, which ones are just like admin needs to know, which ones aren't relevant to our organization, and do a quick filtering on those. At some point, the volume gets to the point where you really need to assess, is this something that people will figure out on their own? Because you end up having to be really selective about what you communicate widely. Not just service owners, but especially the end users are saturated. I mean, you can look at the volume of email your organization gets, and it just incredible. I see in the chat, Aaron's mentioning the MCP agent, and yeah, and then so there are tools coming which will let you use AI to help you filter and sort and repackage information, and we will talk about those next time. But for people in the current process, yeah, the volume is a challenge. We've actually moved to syncing instead of to Planner to a SharePoint list, and then creating views so each service owner only sees their own, and then they can nominate a change announcement for a group discussion. And so that is something that we'll talk about 2 months from now. But let's go on to the next set of questions here. Tools. What did you have to build? Did you build stuff to help you with this process? And were there tools that you tried but were more pain than they were worth? Or is there tool tax when you use some of these tools? What do you see as your essential tools that like everybody needs to use this tool, or do some kind of build something to manage message center? So yeah, tell us about the tools you use to make this more feasible. You mentioned a workflow.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the way, like I said, when I came in, it was already set up, but I did get to see how it worked. Pretty much, we'd be syncing the message center post into a planner. I believe there's a native option now to sync it to planner now. And once synced to planner, we will run a little Power Automate or script or whatever to pretty much have the script like maybe parse through the message center and see what technology it's talking about and assign that post to that person right away, pretty much without us having to go in and add names or anything. Like that it worked, I would say, 50% of the time. The other 50%, it will miscategorize or mislabel or put different people that weren't there. So that's when we had to go in and manually change people, put in different buckets, or put them into different locations. We didn't use any third-party software or anything like that. We used all Microsoft. So pretty much sync to Planner, and from there we will work. And then now you mentioned, Michael, that's a good idea to pretty much sync from Planner to SharePoint list and have a different view for each technology owner, so that way they only see what they are concerned about instead of just the whole list.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the chat, and yeah, some people have done something similar, setting up a Power Automate workflow, which automatically sorts or automatically assigns. The planner is great up until a point, and then you realize, well, okay, there's a bunch of metadata I'd really like to be able to do stuff with, or the pictures in line don't get saved as attachments, so you really can't see what the message, which picture the message is talking about. the and so syncing planner has limitations. The syncing to a SharePoint list, if you're familiar with how to use Power Automate, isn't hard to set up. And again, 2 months from now, we'll have John Burkholder from my team talking about that. And yeah, I mean, a number of years ago, I envisioned building a sort of custom front end to Message Center because Message Center doesn't really understand that this is a team sport. And so nowadays there are a number of third parties that are providing tools to help you work with Message Center. Our marketing partner, ChangePilot, does exactly that. And so I would encourage you to check them out. There's other applications or websites like Delta Pulse, and there's a couple other options out there that provide you tools and to help you work with the volume of stuff you get. And I've got a short list of these in one of my blog posts on my website, michaelblumenthal.me. Let's see. Let's go on to the next set of questions. You've been saying about how you do this triage weekly. Do you feel like that's often enough? Too often? And I think you sort of already answered question number 2 about what breaks with volume increases. And that's sort of the same as question number 3, that people stop showing up to the meetings because either their particular workload isn't being talked about that time, or they're not getting enough value from the conversation. But the you still have to get through all these messages. So
Yeah.
talk about that.
So in reality, like everything, it has its seasons. At the end of the year, we will be getting less and less messages. So we could have changed it to for weekly to bi-weekly, to be honest. But most of the time, it required to be a weekly basis because we will be getting around 40, 50 messages that we had to go through individually or in individual messages and read through them and understand them better. Eh, it wasn't the best. It's not the best approach, but it's the most. It is the best one for that worked for us that weekly basis. And for some other companies that are smaller or they're useless, or they don't really need to. They don't have that many messages. Maybe like once every 2 weeks, even monthly. Who knows? But for us, a weekly basis is what worked best.
And a friend of mine worked at a healthcare organization, and they triage things daily. I mean, like the start of their day was everybody go look at their support team, go look at Message Center, see what's new, and what the impact is going to be. And so they did that daily, and that's one of the ways they manage the load. But I mean, that's now we've gone up from 2 or 3 messages a day to like 7 or 8 messages a day, and more. Yeah, I'd say about 7, probably about 7 messages a day. And yeah, and so David, you also have experience working with a very small firm in the legal industry. So how are they coping with this volume? Are you seeing the same volume, or do they have fewer services and so there's less messages? What are they doing to not just see a sea of change and going, I can't deal with it?
Yeah. Well, it's not a day coming from a very large enterprise company to a company that's around 200 people overall. It's 90 days. So they have less resources, less technologies that they manage. Most of their software is third party, non-Microsoft. So they really do not go into the message center unless something breaks. And to be honest, that's something I'm trying to change, make it more aware of things that are coming in, and act before, be proactive, not be reactive to the changes. But unfortunately, they only go in there when something breaks or something that is gonna break. They just go in there. But that is something I'm taking upon myself to change and make it have it more visibility in our company.
Okay. So let's see. The last question I have for you then before we go to audience questions is, if there's one piece of advice you would give people about managing M365 change, what would it be?
I would say just tackle it little by little. Just don't go in and start taking everything all at once. Just tackle this little things little by little, and throughout you will pretty much tackle it and finish it. But don't be afraid to go in there to start. Don't go in there to start taking all that information to yourself and just to you for whatever reason you don't know what to do with it. You know who to engage. So just take it one priority message center at a time. Make it assign it or and work with it. It's just I would say just little by little. I would if depending on your team, obviously.
I would say, yeah, prioritizing what's the most business critical workloads, and then prioritizing the changes that have the most impact. Again, in the near future, we'll be able to get some help with asking AI about what's going to be the most impactful ones for my organization. But I'd say in today, it's still making sure that and even then, you want a human in the loop to validate those assessments. And so I think the key thing is prioritize and filter and focus. And there is so much out there, but not everything demands your attention. But things like deprecations, you definitely want to pay attention to those because things will stop working and you don't want those to surprise you. Some UI changes, like you can let those go through without communication because they'll just show up in the UI. They may include some coach marks or in-product experiences that introduce the user to them, and most users will figure them out, and therefore they're not worth the effort it would take to communicate about them. Communicating to end users can be hard because if you send email, which is still a very popular way to communicate, a lot of that email goes unread. And so you have to figure out what's the most important things for people to know and just focus on communicating those and managing just the most important things. And because, again, the volume can easily overwhelm you. Okay, I'm going to do a little poll here. I'm going to put a statement in chat, and you can give it a thumbs up if you do this. So those of you who use Planner, give that a thumbs up. So yeah, give a reaction, a thumbs up if one of those statements reflects how you work. I'm curious what the division is here. We got 23 people in the meeting. I'm curious how people do things. Do you have a process for identifying new items that will be on by default? Mostly just reading carefully. And Becky asking again, David Ramos, do you have a time period that you'll review changes for? For example, any meeting 30 plus days ahead falls over the next meeting, something like that. I'll say that we try to triage most things as they come in, but every change has that, or almost every change has that window of it'll land in your tenant between the start, middle, or end of this month and the start, middle, or end of that month. And so when we review them in Planner, we would set the due date based on the deployment either start or end, depending on the change. If we needed to communicate to people before it landed, we would focus on making sure we had a response plan in place by the start of it. If it was something that people would only be able to do something about or know about after it landed, we would set that end date to the due date for the task to something around the end date of the deployment window. David, what did you do?
Yep, same thing as you just we tackle them as they come in, depending on when they were due or when they were expected to be due. We were assign them a priority, but pretty much every week we dedicate ourselves 1 hour to just review the message center.
Yeah. And I mean, if there are ones that land farther out, then you have more lead time. Depending on the nature of the change, you could defer that to a future meeting in terms of your review cycle. So yeah, that is an option for some. It all depends on how much lead time. The other thing is that we see those deployment windows change. And so, I mean, that's something else that can be hard to track, but some of these dates do slip. And so if you find you may find that you are end up reviewing the same change in multiple change meetings because the date has flipped. How do we manage updates to changes? David, you answer that first. When you see a change and then sometimes the next week or the next month you see it updated. I know if you're using Planner, you'll see it come back into the intake plan bucket.
Yes.
How do you deal with that?
Pretty much update the task on Planner, change as a priority, and get a final confirmation from Microsoft because sometimes the planner says the business says something, and Microsoft is thinking about something else. So get a final confirmation and the specific due date for this task or the due date for this item to be changed.
I've got another question. Who was involved in the change triage calls? Would you have someone from user adoption and security, or were they only invited if their areas were on the agenda? For us, we regularly had someone from security there. We don't have user adoption as a dedicated practice. We do have internal communications, but we would triage them. IT communications would not be in there, but then the things that needed communications, we would follow up with them afterwards for the particular items that needed their attention. David, how did you work with it?
We did have a contact that would attend the meetings once in a while, depending on the workload, depending on the schedule. We didn't have a user adoption specific resource in those meetings, but we would just cascade down information that was pertinent to their technology or the group. Pretty much anybody that wasn't there on those meetings, we had to cascade down or send them an email saying, "Okay, this came through. Please review and take action."
Let me go on to. So first of all, a thank you to David to coming here and talking with us, and to answer some of the questions about the recording. Yes, the recording will be on YouTube. We will send out slides and links to follow. We'll put the slide deck on SlideShare, and feel free to connect with David and I on LinkedIn. Let's see. Next month we have the product team, and that's a great time for all of us to talk to them about some of the changes they're making to the release process, as well as the automation and AI tools that they're providing. In July, we'll talk about syncing Message Center to a list. And if any of you have processes and Message Center experiences you'd like to share, please reach out to us, and I'd be happy to have you on one of these future webinars. I should also mention that if you're planning to go to Microsoft Ignite in November in San Francisco, I'm hoping to have an in-person Message Center meeting on the Monday of that week at the Microsoft office in San Francisco. Okay, thank you everybody, and I want to give a special thanks out to Ella Louise, who has been moderating this session and helped tremendously with the marketing of it. And you can see in the chat links to our future events, the June and July events. Again, June with the product team behind Message Center at Microsoft, and July on Message Center Sync to a SharePoint list. Thank you, everybody, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.